I appreciate everybody being on for a few minutes tonight. I have a lot to share. We were having some slight technical difficulties. My colleague Grace at National Society of High School Scholars is on as well, but we're just having some audio difficulties. And but she'll be chatting with me just to make sure that we're all set. Grace, you can hear me okay? Okay, great. So I've done this presentation many times, everybody, and I do have a lot to share, but I've learned to be concise, succinct, and my goal is to answer all of your questions about SAT, ACT, PSAT, this crazy year that we're in, and to do so in as short a manner as possible. And of course, I'm going to take questions. Typically, there are lots of questions. Grace will be helping me out, moderating some of the questions, and I may take a few as the presentation goes on, but I'll take most of the questions at the end. I'm actually going to go ahead and share. I'm going to try to share my camera as well. And Grace, if you don't mind, just let me know if everybody can see my camera now as well. Great. Okay, so let's jump in. So it's important for you all to know a little bit about me. I grew up right here on Long Island. I attended Princeton University, completed a teacher preparation program at Princeton, came back to Long Island, and my parents spent their whole careers as teachers. And they said, you did well on the SAT, ACT, maybe you could help some of the students at our school. And so I started tutoring. This was back in 1998. And I found, don't do the math on that, and I just found right away that students were going into these tests with no tricks, no strategies, no techniques. They weren't aware of the timing as far as the tests go. They weren't even aware sometimes of what was on the exam. So anything I was teaching them was making a difference. At the end of the hour, the parent would thank me, the student would thank me, the parent would say, would you like a chicken cutlet Parmesan hero? I would say, yes, please. Would you like some warm chocolate chip cookies? Once I heard that, I said, that's it. I'm going to start tutoring all day, every day. I'm going to earn as many chocolate chip cookies as possible. And I just started working with students all day, every day, and was having a lot of success helping them improve their scores. From there, we created a web-based program that I'll share a little bit of information about later. So any student anywhere can follow a simple checklist and improve their SAT score 150 points, improve their ACT score 3 points, and the organization has kind of grown from there. So that's just a little bit about me. One other thing that I want to share and emphasize is I can empathize with all of you out there. All of us went through the whole spring with the sort of home learning plan. My wife and I have twins that are heading into 6th grade in the fall. So our house was just as nutty as all of your homes. Here's a picture of my son and I back in, I guess it was January, and then a picture of my wife Allison and our daughter. And again, I share these slides because I'm very sensitive to what everyone has been going through these past few months as families, trying to keep moving forward as far as academically, as far as the college process, and just how challenging it's been. So some of the things that some of the lessons we've learned in our household, I'll share as well. One final thing about myself, I did sit and take the SAT a few years ago. The local newspaper, I wrote an article, or wrote a piece, local newspaper Newsday published the article. They titled it, "Old Guy Takes the SAT." It was my experience sitting and taking the SAT as an old guy. And when people ask me, well, what did you learn from the experience? It reminded me of how anxiety ridden the whole process can be. And one of the ways to reduce that anxiety, not get rid of it, not eliminate it, that's impossible. One of the ways to reduce the anxiety is to be as prepared as possible. These tests are so repetitive. So when you practice enough questions and you know what to expect, instead of your anxiety level being a 10, you can get it, as low as possible. It'll be different for everybody. But that's just a little bit about me. And I do want to learn a little bit about you all, and it makes my presentation more effective when I know a little bit about the audience. So I'm going to try to switch over here for a quick second and just ask a few poll questions. So let me see here. Okay. Okay, so I have posted a series of questions. I appreciate a bunch of you have already started answering. Please take your time. The first question, just, are you parent and student together, just a parent, just a student? And then the second question, what grade are you in? And again, just take your time. The third question is also just one choice. How much online learning have you done so far? That question was kind of more, I'm not sure what just happened there. The answers kind of went blank on me. Yeah, and it's not that important. I can just, okay, yeah, no, I was seeing, Grace, I was seeing the answers kind of updating as they were coming in, but then it just okay. Yeah, so everybody, I do have to apologize. I'm used to using a different platform for these webinars. This platform is great. I'm just not familiar with it. So I think what I'm going to do, Grace, if it's okay, is as people continue to answer these questions, you know what? I'm going to give it another 30 seconds, and then I'm going to go back to my slides. I did want to highlight everybody that with question 4, it's a question I've asked now many times on webinars similar to this, and I find it to be a very interesting question. How do you prefer to learn? And I think many of us prefer, for sure, some type of classroom model. But I think I know myself, I've seen the value of a blended model, some in person, some online. Obviously, there are some things about learning online that can be very efficient as far as going at your own pace and learning the skills that you need to learn rather than every student in a class learning the same skills at the same time. But I think the depends on the instructor is also interesting, because I've had many students tell me that it really comes down more to the teacher. So if it's a great teacher, doesn't matter if it's in person or online, and same is true if it's maybe a teacher, it's not a perfect fit for you, it might not be effective either way. Okay, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to, Grace, are you able to close the poll? Thank you. And let's see. And Grace, am I back then to my screen? Okay. Okay, thanks. Sorry, everybody. Just want to make sure I'm in the right spot. So if you only remember one thing from this presentation, I want it to be that these are the most predictable tests in the world. And that is very good news for us. These tests would be very stressful if we didn't know what to expect. We know exactly what to expect. Because these tests are predictable, that warrants preparation. So by the time you take an official SAT or ACT, you should know exactly what you're going to score, or within a very narrow range. And so to build on this slide, and again, for years, there was a misconception that these tests were IQ tests and that there wasn't really much you could do about it. You were either good at these tests or not good at these tests. And that's simply not true. It's false. There's a lot you can do to improve your score. So it's over 20, 30 years. And again, many of you on this call might say, yeah, well, of course, I know that. But for years, the SAT and ACT were not thought of in this way. They were thought of as tests that you couldn't really do much about. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, what's our goal tonight? Number one, we want to use higher SAT and ACT scores to get accepted to more places, to have more options. Nobody wants to get a rejection letter. You want to be accepted as many places as possible. And then number two, we want to use higher scores to earn more money in academic merit aid. And so I'm not going to ask you to put in 5 hours a day on SAT and ACT prep, but any time that you put in is the best use of your time. You'll get a really high return on that investment of time because you will get accepted to more places. And one of those places could be one of those dream schools. I never want a student to have just one dream school in their head because there are so many great schools out there, but you have some schools you would love to go to. And I don't want it to be the case that you have everything else going for you, but your SAT or ACT scores aren't high enough, and that limits your chances of getting in. There's no reason that should be. You put in the time, it will make a huge difference. So that's our goal tonight. It's our very important goal. And I am very passionate that every single person, every single student on this call can improve their scores. And we'll go through some of the ways how. So if a student gets just one more question correct on the SAT, how many points does his or her score often go up? And this I know is one of the poll questions. The answer is 10. If you just get one more question correct, that's 10 more points in your score. And let me be clear. Let's say there's a student who scored a 1030. If that student had just gotten one more question correct, now they have a 1040. One more question correct, now a 1050. When students realize that, it changes their entire mindset about this test, their entire attitude. Because again, I'm very passionate. Every student can get 5 more math questions, 5 more reading questions, and 5 more grammar questions. If you do that, that's 150 more points on your score. That's a very significant increase, and it's reasonable, it's realistic. The news on the ACT is just as good. If you get one more question right on the ACT, let's say English section, that often results in a 1-point increase on that part of your ACT. So if you get 4 more ACT English, 4 more math, 4 more reading, 4 more science, that could be a 4-point increase on your ACT score, which again, many of you know is a substantial, significant improvement that will put you in a different category as far as your acceptance chances. So again, if there's only 2 things you remember from the webinar, make this one because it changes students' mindset of, I can do this, I can improve my score. So what are the national averages on the ACT and SAT, and what's a good score? And I know, again, these were the final two poll questions. For the ACT, the national average is a 21. And by the way, if you don't have a pen or a pencil, a piece of paper, take a quick second and grab one. Or if you want to just jot notes into your phone. I do this presentation in person a lot. I do this presentation online a lot. And typically, students and parents do take quite a few notes. So for the ACT, the national average is a 21. And people are surprised by that because so many students are shooting for like a 30 or above. And I think it's great to have that goal. But if you score a 26 or a 27, that's way above average. And so sometimes students' expectations are a little bit out of whack because they don't know that the national average is a 21. Of course, the max score is a 36, just to make sure everyone's aware. For the SAT, the national average is about a 1070. And again, people are surprised by that. They thought it was closer to 1170 or 1200. The maximum score, of course, is a 1600. But if you score a 1200, that's way above average. Now, as far as what's a good score, of course, good is a relative term. What I always say is Google some of the colleges you're interested, average SAT scores at blank, And whatever those averages are, of course, your goal is to score higher than that. That would be a good score for that school. But again, scoring a 26 or 27 on the ACT, that's way above average. 1,200 on the SAT, way above average. Of course, many of you have higher aspirations, and I think that's great. But again, I just want to make sure everyone understands the scales that we're talking about. Okay, so one of the most common questions that I've been getting for the last 3-4 months, what would I do? So my son and my daughter are entering 6th grade. What would I do if my son or my daughter was entering 12th grade? Or if, and I know a lot of students are on here, by themselves, which is great. If you can grab mom or dad, do, so this way you don't have to relay all of this information to them. But what would I do if I was heading into my senior year? So the good news is the answer is pretty straightforward. If I was heading into my senior year, or if my son or daughter was heading into senior year, I would make sure that I would be preparing them for the August or the September SAT, and I'd be preparing them for the September ACT. Of course, we're all hoping that the health situation improves and around the country students can take these exams. The sooner that you can take an exam, the better. These are essentially the next exams coming up. Obviously, there's an ACT this Saturday that'll be given in some parts of the country. But you see the third rectangle there. Then I would take a second ACT or a second SAT. I would not take both. So I think it's a smart idea to take each test once. It's not necessary to take each test twice. So you take each test once, and then whichever test you scored higher on, you take that a second time. If you scored about the same, which by the way, 70% of students will score about the same on the SAT and ACT. So if you scored about the same, then you just take the test that you felt more comfortable with. Take that one a second time. And I'm hoping that's your final exam. So a total of 3 exams, 1 SAT, 1 ACT, and then take the one more time, okay? And let's dig into this a little bit more. So what are the upcoming ACT dates? And aside from the July ACT, so the nice thing is, many of you probably saw, the ACT recently announced that they are going to be offering many test dates as well. Of course, they're aware that many students have not been able to take the exam, and many students need to take the exam, not only for college admissions, but to be eligible for scholarships. Some athletes need to take the exam for athletic requirements. So the point is, they're offering the exam many times this fall. And you can see all the dates here. Feel free to take a screenshot if you'd like. Of course, this webinar is being recorded, so you can access the recording. But you have many opportunities to take the ACT. And then same goes for the SAT, right? So there's, starting in August, every month of the year, there's going to be an SAT. And even possibly January, depending on the demand, which it seems like the demand is going to be very high. So in all likelihood, they will have a January SAT as well. Okay, so I want to make sure everyone's aware, the College Board, the folks who make the SAT, has asked colleges to accept scores as late as possible in their process. So even in normal years, students, seniors take the SAT late, like November or December. Even have seniors take the SAT sometimes in the fall when it's a special circumstance. And colleges, even in regular years, will wait to make a final decision. This year, that's going to be even more the case. Number 2 is, the College Board has asked colleges to equally consider students for admission who are unable to take the exam. So if you live in an area and you just have 0 opportunities to take the exam, for this one class, many schools are going test optional, so that you don't have to submit scores. Of course, if you do submit scores, there's often an advantage, and again, often scholarships are based on test scores. But then the third thing is, recognize that students who do submit scores may only have been able to take the test once, right? So scores may not be as high. So all of this is to say that there is going to be less pressure on the class of 2021 as far as SAT and ACT scores go, which is a good thing. Everybody, we're all in this together, and the colleges understand the the highly unusual year that class of students has experienced. So I just want to make one more point, or make sure I'm being very clear. Folks have said to me, I've heard that many schools are now test optional. So many schools have moved to test optional either for 1 year or for 2 or 3 years. Now, there's a difference between test optional and test blind. Test blind means that they're just not going to look at scores at all. Test optional means you can submit scores. And if you do submit strong scores, that's going to give you an advantage in the admissions process. So if you have a chance to take the exam and you can prepare and do well, then you absolutely should. But you don't necessarily have to, right? That's what test optional means. So, and if there are specific questions around this, then again, I can take some of those questions at the end. But I just wanted to be clear, because a lot of times we all see headlines. I know it's true for me. See a headline about something, sometimes that headline can be misleading. Sometimes if you dig into the details a little bit more, there's sort of more to the story. And the more to the story here is, if you can take the SAT or ACT, if you can score well, then at most colleges, that's still going to give you an advantage as far as admissions go. Okay, so then what would I do if I had a rising junior, rising 11th grader, or if I was a rising junior? So there's something interesting here that unfortunately a lot of families are not aware of. Both the College Board and the ACT offer services, and you can see the names of the services there, where you pay an extra $20 and the organization sends the entire test back to you so you can analyze your mistakes. And it's really been tragic to me that for 22 years of doing this, the vast majority of parents that I talk to are not aware of these services. So I like to explain it this way. Imagine taking a 4-hour exam, getting a score you're not completely satisfied with. No one tells you what you did wrong. And then somebody says, go take that test again, right? That's absurd. If somebody said it to me, I'd say, no, I'm not taking the test again. I don't even know what I did wrong the first time. Why would I take the test again? The good news is for the SAT and ACT, there's a better way. And the better way is to be aware of when these services are offered and take advantage of them. So if I was heading into my junior year, I might be targeting that October SAT, mainly so I can see the exact questions that I'm getting wrong, and I can use those mistakes, I can learn from them to score higher in March and May when they offer the question and answer service again. And I'd almost definitely be thinking about the December. Matter of fact, my son and my daughter are going to be taking the December ACT in their junior year, not this year. And what I'm going to tell my son and my daughter is, you're not taking the December ACT because it's ultimately going to be your best score. You're taking the December ACT so we can see what you're doing wrong, you can learn from your mistakes, and then you can improve in either April or June. So I hope this sounds like a very straightforward plan. And again, I'm going to put my contact info at the end in case people have questions or confused. But the straightforward plan is take advantage of these services so you can be as efficient as possible. I do not want these tests to dominate your junior and senior years. There's no reason why they should. We want to be strategic. We want to get in and get out. We want to have a plan of, I'm taking this test as a stepping stone to getting ultimately my best score. Just going to pause for a second. I want to go to I have to go back and forth to the slides here. And just take a look at some of the questions that have come in. So Grace, if there and please feel free to chat in questions. And Grace is going to be sort of sending some my way. Okay. Yep. Thanks. So don't be shy. It makes the presentation more fun and engaging when you guys sort of pepper me with questions. I'm sure if you have a question, there's probably 50 other people on this webinar who are thinking the same thing. So go ahead and chat them in, and then I'll take some as we go. Yep. Yeah, good question. That is, oh man, it's really sad how my eyesight is going. But here's a good question. I want to know if it's possible to see the correct answers to the questions I got wrong on a practice SAT. So great question. It depends on where you took the practice SAT. At Method Test Prep, we give practice SATs online, and you do get a full score report, questions right, questions wrong. But it would depend on where you took your practice exam. But you should be able to. Yeah, and you see, so when you order these services, you see the questions you got right, you see the questions you got wrong, you see the correct answers. So it really it's an unbelievably valuable tool, because if you sit with a friend or a parent or a tutor or a teacher, very quickly you can identify the questions that you just made a silly mistake. Maybe you had it down to a 50-50, you weren't sure between those two, and you guessed wrong, right? And so those are mistakes that you can improve on very quickly and easily. Yeah, great question. I think that's Serena. Should I be worried that I haven't taken the SAT? You should not be worried. That's very normal this year. And a matter of fact, you're likely to score higher in the fall because of everything you've learned up to this point. So sometimes students are so in a rush to take the SAT or ACT early, and sometimes that's fine, but it's not a problem. And again, I would just register for the earliest test that you can, and hopefully in your area it will be given. Okay. Just gonna take one or two more questions here. Yeah, great question here, Tristan. I want to apply for early action, but I'm also taking a fall SAT. How long on average does it take for scores to get back to me? So the College Board and the ACT have done a better job the last couple of years of getting the scores back quickly. So the answer to your question is you're going to get your scores back pretty quickly. And yes, you can still apply early action or early decision. So that's a very common question. So good question. The answer is yes. Okay. And yeah, a lot of people are asking, how early should I start to study for the SAT and ACT? So my answer for 22 years has been the summer before your junior year is a perfect time to start. Now, this summer is unique and unusually good because of all the things that have been canceled. I know my own son, my daughter, so much of what they were going to do this summer is canceled. So they have more time than they normally would. So if I was heading into my junior year or heading into my senior year, now is the time to prepare. It will make an enormous difference on your score. And it will, you're most likely going to be busy in the fall. Hopefully you'll be very busy. Hopefully in a lot of places, schools will be back. So if you cannot get a lot of the prep out of the way now, between now and the start of school, that's the more intelligent way, or more intelligent schedule time frame. Okay, I'm going to head back to the presentation, and then I'm going to take some more questions towards the end, and hopefully I'll answer a lot of the questions as I go here. Okay, so how many times is the, and kind of talk about, so I'll touch on this quickly. Ideal number of times would be one of each, and then take one test twice. Good, how many times can you take them? As many times as you want. So you're not penalized for taking the test too many times. And it's also worth noting that when it comes down to scholarships, a lot of times schools will say, listen, if you score a 1250, you're eligible for an extra $5,000 in academic merit aid. This college doesn't mind how many times you take it. So in that case, I would just keep taking the exam over and over again, right? $5,000 a year, $20,000 total. That's a pretty awesome opportunity to save yourself and save your family $20,000 just by scoring higher in the test. And that's not a pie in the sky example. We have students all the time who reach out to us for test prep, who that's exactly the scenario that they're looking at. They can just score a little bit higher. They're looking at a much larger academic scholarship package, a much larger academic merit aid package. If you get a question wrong on the SAT or ACT, you lose how many points? The answer is 0. So there's no penalty for wrong answers. And I know a lot of you on this call know this already, but I feel like it's my job to remind everyone of this every single time I do a presentation, because when I look over a question and answer service, I often see a lot of questions left blank. The student was told to answer every question, but in the heat of the moment, they forgot. So there is absolutely no reason to leave a question blank. Answer every single question. And people say, well, can that really make a big difference on my score? It can make a massive difference on your score. And I want to use this next slide to illustrate. So how many questions are there on the 45-minute ACT English section? Why don't you just have an answer in your head? Don't chat it in. Just put an answer in your head. How many questions do you think there are? When I ask this question, I often get the answer 45, 50, 60. The answer is actually 75. So, and people are shocked when they hear that. So they only give you 45 minutes to answer 75 questions. You do the math on that, that's about 35 seconds per question, which is challenging, but it's not impossible. So there's a couple of very important things that I want to illustrate based on this data. The first thing is, let's say that you're working pretty quickly. And let's say in 44 minutes, you get through 65 questions, which is pretty fast. And then the proctor says there's 1 minute left. When the proctor says there's 1 minute left, you have to at that point stop and make sure you bubble in an answer for those last 10, because there are only 4 answer choices on the ACT English section. So just by randomly guessing on those last 10, you're going to get 2.5 more questions correct. Not just, A, or B, or C, it doesn't matter what letter. You might get lucky. There might be 3 or 4 C's or B's or whatever you chose. You may get an extra 4 points just from making sure to fill in every answer. So used to be on the SAT, you lost a quarter of a point for a wrong answer. That's not the case anymore. There is no reason to leave a question blank. Answer every question. The second very important thing that this slide brings up is, so again, people say, how am I supposed to answer 75 questions in 45 minutes? It's because they test you on the same things over and over again. They're literally testing you on like the same 11 grammar rules over and over again. So if you know what 11 rules they're testing you on and you study them, you can get through the questions very quickly, right? So just to give you one example, they love testing you on redundancy. So so what that means is they'll underline a part of the passage that says the old elderly man. And then you have to choose the best choice for the underline. And choice A will say no change. Leave it as the old elderly man. Choice B will say the elderly feeble man. Choice C will say the feeble old man. And choice D will just say the elderly man. And of course, choice D is the correct answer because there's no extra word, no unnecessary word. The ACT is trying to teach students to write in a succinct way. So what's crazy is when I go over that question with a student who got it wrong, often the student will say, I'll say, why did you choose B? And they'll say, oh, I thought there was a spelling error on the other choice. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's no spelling on the ACT. That's a good example of a student who didn't even know it was on the exam and was just looking for the wrong thing. Not their fault, or no, they just didn't know. So here's the crazy part. There are 4 of those questions on every single ACT, and there are multiple questions that test you on redundancy on the SAT as well. So that's 4 for the price of 1, right? You literally know 1 more thing, and you get 4 more questions correct. And the SAT and ACT are full of concepts or rules like that are very easy for anybody to learn and understand. You just need to spend some time. Okay. Can you mix and match your best scores? The answer is yes. That's called super scoring. You cannot do it between the SAT and ACT, but if you take the SAT twice or 3 times, or if you take the ACT twice or 3 times, you can mix and match your best scores. And that's a practice that's been going on for as long as I can remember on the SAT. And on the ACT, they've moved to that system now, where they'll automatically mix and match your best, each part of the ACT, right? The English, the math, the reading, the science. Okay, so I'm such a nerd, I can't help myself. I want to share one more sort of tip or strategy or technique. And it just, again, I think will motivate you all to realize that, wow, with just a little bit of knowledge, I can make a big difference. So where's the error in this sentence? Just go ahead and put an answer in your head. Do not need to chat it in. Okay, and if you're not sure, just go ahead and have a guess before I hit advance this slide. All right, so the error is the congressional panel issued their findings. No, it would be the congressional panel issued its findings. And this is a good example of what many people consider a trick question. We know that a panel typically consists of multiple people, but in this sentence, it's one panel, it's singular. Because it's a singular noun, you need a singular pronoun. It's. There is a plural pronoun, right? If it was congressional panels, right, then it would be there. But here it's it. So this is called subject pronoun agreement. This is on every single SAT, guaranteed, every single ACT, guaranteed. So it's a great example of, you know, it's going to be on the test. You can learn to look for it. You can learn to pick out the error. Not only are you then very likely to get these questions right, I almost said guaranteed to get them right, but you're also going to save yourself a lot of time, right? And then you have more time for the questions that require more effort. But if you can, have these kind of rules memorized and learned, then not only do you get more questions right, you save a lot of time. Okay, true or false? The ACT science section tests students on science knowledge. That's false. The ACT science section is our reading comprehension section. What I mean by that is they give you a chart, a graph, a table, or paragraphs. You have to pull information out of what they're giving you. The reason this is so important, I have so many students who say, well, I don't think the ACT is for me. I'm not a great science student. That's irrelevant, right? So, as a matter of fact, let's talk about, if you're strong in English, the ACT might be the test for you, because 3 of the 4 ACT sections are going to come down to reading and English ability. You have the ACT English, which we already talked about. They're just testing you on grammar rules. You have the ACT reading section, where all of the information, all the answers to all the questions are in the passage. You just have to get speedy at finding the answers. But if you're a strong reader, you can do very well in that section. Look back in the passages, find the answers. Then you have the ACT science section, where it's not a test of science knowledge. It's a test of going back and reading what they're giving you. The second reason I like to highlight this, the science section can be very intimidating. I know even myself, when I look at a new science passage, my first reaction is, oh my goodness, what's going on here? But then I take a deep breath and I realize they're just asking me questions on the information I'm being given. So, that I take a deep breath, I go to the passages, and I can find the answers. Excluding the optional essay section, how many sections on the SAT, how many on the ACT? The answer is 4 sections on each, but there is a big difference. On the SAT, 2 of the 4 sections are math. On the ACT, only 1 of the 4 sections is math, as I sort of alluded to earlier. So that's a big difference, right, on a percentage basis. So if you're stronger in math than you are in English, you may feel more comfortable and maybe lean towards the SAT, because half of your SAT score is going to come down to the math sections, whereas only 25% of your ACT score is going to come down to the math sections. Okay, SAT versus ACT, on which test you have more time per question? The answer is on the SAT, you have more time per question. So let's talk about that for a second. On the SAT, the questions are more involved, so you need a little bit more time. The ACT is really a test where you have to move quickly. I often call it a 4-hour sprint. People say, well, if you're going to describe it like that, that sounds pretty miserable. Why would anybody take the ACT? Well, because many of the questions are pretty straightforward. So as long as you stay focused, and by the way, after the old guy took the SAT, then I took the ACT, and I drank a big cup of coffee that morning. I'm not even a coffee drinker, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to lose my concentration, because I knew the questions were going to be pretty straightforward. I knew I could do well, but I wanted to make sure I didn't have a lapse in concentration. Now, I'm not suggesting that every student should drink a cup of coffee, maybe some green tea, something healthy. Caffeine is proven to improve concentration. What certainly everybody should do is get a good night's sleep, eat a hearty breakfast, stay relaxed the night before. These things do make a difference, because These are tests of stamina and endurance. So on the SAT, you do get more time per question. The questions are more involved, so makes sense. It's not that one test is easier or harder, just slightly different formats. Okay, so I've shared a lot of information. I'm going to share some more as I get to more questions, but of course, the real question everybody has is, okay, how can I score higher? What's a smart next step? How can I increase my SAT score 150 points, my ACT score 3 points? And I'm very passionate and confident that every one of you can do this. So one smart next step is my company, my organization, Method Test Prep, we have a self-paced program, and it's a checklist for students to follow. It's a series of 15-minute exercises. And the fee for the program, you can see on the screen, is $149. Once you pay that fee, you have access through graduation. So it's essentially having a tutor 24/7. You can learn every trick, every strategy, every technique. You can work at your own pace. You work at the times that are good for you. So it's a really amazing value. We have had many NSHSS students take advantage of this offer. We've gotten tons of positive feedback about the program. And I'll just show a couple slides because I know it's more helpful to you all to see it rather than just hear. So this is what the student home screen looks like. Again, it's just a checklist. We're actually changing it from weeks to units, but it's just a checklist to follow. And again, I'm very realistic. I'm not asking you to sit for 3 hours straight. You sit down, you knock out a 15-minute exercise, you get a check mark, and then you move on to the next task. And you go through this checklist. Students who follow the checklist have improved their scores an average of 150 points on SAT and 3 points on the ACT, as I mentioned. The reason why the checklist is so effective, it's full of audio and video, right? We don't expect you to just read words off the screen. So there's an audio component to every lesson. It's not an actor or a robot, it's a teacher. And the teacher is walking you through how to understand that concept, right? So you're listening to the teacher's voice while you're following along with the text. It's the most effective way to learn. And then when you're done, there's no lesson that's more than 5 minutes long. When you're done, you're presented with a set of practice problems. Of course, that's how we all learn best. We learn something and then we have to apply what we just learned. We have to practice. So as soon as you attempt a question, you get immediate feedback, which is nice. You're told if you're right or wrong, the correct answer, the answer you selected. And then most importantly, you're presented with a variety of explanations. So an audio explanation, a video explanation, a written explanation. So you can choose the explanation that's most appropriate, most helpful for you. For most of us, a video is most helpful, right? So if I'm struggling with a question, I want to watch a video. And again, it's not a robot, it's a teacher walking you through how to do that type of question. In addition to what I just shared, the program does have an evaluation test for both SAT and ACT. So a lot of students like to take both evaluations, get a sense of which test might be better for them. So that's included in the $149 price. In fact, everything is included in the price. We also have full-length exams. So part of the program is you can take 2 full practice SATs and 2 full practice ACTs. So 4 full-length exams total, and get a really accurate picture of where you stand. In addition, we have a vocabulary builder section. Every single student I've ever worked with has said to me, I know I need to improve my vocabulary. Can you give me an easy way of improving my vocabulary? When I show them this tool, I say, we can't make it any easier. You just quiz yourself on words. The words pop up, you do your best, and then the program's keeping a personal word list for you. So the words you've missed, the words you've mastered. Of course, the game is to get more words into words mastered. And many students have gotten kind of into it. It gets a little addictive. You want to get that number up. And of course, scoring high, having a stronger vocabulary, yes, you're going to score higher on the SAT and ACT, of course, but we all understand it's important for the rest of your life, right? Important for success in high school, it's success in college, success in your professional career. A strong vocabulary is a huge asset. So another part of the program. Also, there is a feature of the program called Scores by Concept. And when you click on it, it's exactly what it sounds like. You can see how you're performing kind of concept by concept. So you can see your areas of strength and weakness, right? So this student can see these areas, and then you can actually have the program serve you a set of questions just in your areas of weakness, right? So in that sense, the program becomes very personalized, very individualized. So this program, I know I'm biased, of course, but it's a no-brainer. I would encourage you to sign up. As there's no reason to wait, because once you pay the fee, you have access through graduation, through the last time you'll ever need to take the SAT or ACT. Okay, so that's the online, the self-paced program. One other, or a couple other offers I wanted to mention. This month, we're offering 25% off our Advantage classes. So our Advantage classes are normally $300, or excuse me, $400. This month they're $300, so $100 off. These are 18 hours of live instruction broken down into 2-hour increments. So you can see that we have an SAT Advantage class starting on July 19th. This class is 5 to 8, right? This happens to be a Sunday class. A lot of students say that Sunday is really the best day for them. They want to keep their weeks open. So this class is 5. So in this case, it's a 3-hour class, and it meets for 6 Sundays in a row. And when you pay the fee, not only can you be on live for those 18 hours, but you automatically get the recordings, right? Which, of course, that's very valuable, because if you have to miss a class, or even if you don't have to miss a class, it's nice to be able to go back and watch the classes a second or third time, especially as your test gets closer. And then we offer the same Advantage class for the ACT. So you can see here, this is an ACT class starting on July 20th. This one's 1 to 3 p.m. and it's Mondays, Wednesdays, I believe Fridays as well. All of these classes are very easy to find on our website, which is, of course, just methodtestprep.com. So if you go to methodtestprep.com, you'll find all of these options. Very easily you can navigate to them. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we have so many families who say to us, some of the other things that we offer, they're interested in, they want to take advantage of. What they want the most is private tutoring, one-on-one tutoring. And recently we started offering private tutoring for a lower rate. So now you can hire a private tutor for as low as $60 per hour. It's normally $160 per hour. And the best way to utilize a private tutor is to have done some questions beforehand. So an hour, 2 hours worth of questions, jot down the ones that are giving you trouble, and then you just say to the tutor, these are the types of questions I'm having trouble on. And in 1 hour, you can get through quite a few questions, right? So even though private tutoring can be more expensive, it's also very efficient, and often you don't need that many hours of private tutoring. So again, all of these options are right on our homepage, the website. And these are just a couple of the documents that I wanted to have. But what I want to go to now are just the questions, because I know there are many questions coming in. So let me go over here. Okay. Yeah, good question. How does your PSAT score reflect your SAT score? So the answer is the PSAT score can be a very accurate indication of where you stand at that moment. But if you took the PSAT last October, there's a very good chance that you're going to score much higher if you took the PSAT even, let's say, tomorrow, right? So I don't want anybody to think their PSAT score is, set in stone, or that's the best they can do. So it's an accurate read on where you were at that moment. But sometimes 10th graders, they read too much into their PSAT score. So that's the biggest thing I want everyone to understand. You can make a huge difference. Yes. So great question, Carmen. Can I do a sample test to determine which, am I better at SAT, better at ACT? So yes, not only do we have the evaluations that I shared earlier, but we also have full-length practice exams, it's $15 to take a full-length exam. So you can take one of each, and then obviously get a sense of which test you'll do better on. It's simple, everyone. You guys probably know this. You can just Google SAT versus ACT scores. and you can see the concordance chart. You can see which test you did better on. Yeah, good question. How does our program differ from Khan Academy? So I love Khan Academy. I use it with my son and my daughter. It's great for younger students. One of the things that many students have told us they find frustrating about Khan Academy, when you're using Khan Academy for SAT prep, when you get a question wrong, the video that plays doesn't explain that particular question. It's just a video in that general area. And so many students have found that to be very frustrating. Another sort of advantage of our program for Khan Academy is we have both SAT and ACT prep in one location. Obviously, Khan Academy only has SAT prep, so then you have to go elsewhere to find ACT prep. Yeah, so good question. Do I think that students who submit their test scores this upcoming year will have a bigger chance of getting in than students who don't, even if the school has become test optional? So the answer is that's a college by college answer. It's case by case. But just understand that if a school says they're test optional, that means they're still willing to accept test scores. And if you take the test and you do well, then of course that's going to give you an advantage. So yes, that will give you an advantage in admissions decisions. Now, if a college says they're test blind, that means they're literally not looking at the scores at all. So it's a case by case. Yeah, good question, Gail. On method test prep, yes, we have the 4 full-length exams, but once you complete those, you can go to that scores by concept and you can focus on your areas of weakness. We have over 4,500 questions on the method test prep program, so there's plenty of material to keep you busy. You'll have a lot to do before you use it up. Okay, yes. Good question, Megan. So I mentioned that there's an option for juniors to receive their test results back question by question. Is that option available for seniors? Yes. So if you're a senior and you take the October SAT, you can pay the extra $20, order the question and answer service, and get the entire test sent back to you. And you can use that to improve and then take the November SAT or December SAT, which again, colleges will absolutely allow you to take those later exams and still submit those scores, and they'll still consider those scores as a factor in admissions. Okay, so Patricia, how can you sign up? So to sign up for the Method Test Prep program, you just go just to methodtestprep.com. There's a big square that says self-paced. You click on that square, and then you can just fill out the fields, put in credit card information. Again, the cost is $149. And if you have any questions, our contact info is right there. Yeah, good question, Finley. When in my high school career should I enroll in a test prep course? I would not enroll before the summer, before junior year. So if you're a 10th grade, if you're heading into 10th grade right now, my advice to you is put 100% of your effort into your GPA, because that's the #1 thing colleges are looking at. What is your high school GPA? What's the strength of your schedule? Take the most challenging courses. So if you're heading into your sophomore year, take the most challenging courses that your school offers or that you feel you can be successful at, and get the highest GPA possible. And then when 10th grade is over and you're heading into junior year, that's a good time to enroll in a test prep course. Yeah, Ashley, good question. I'm a rising senior and I have an SAT score, but my ACT has been rescheduled twice already. What if I can't get an ACT score? That's not a problem. You do not need to submit both. You just submit the one that you scored better on. So you already have an SAT score. Hey, if you can take the ACT, great. And I know you can do very well on it. But if you can't take the ACT, and this obviously doesn't just go for Ashley, it goes for everybody. If you can't take each test once, that's okay. Maybe you could take the SAT a second time and improve further there. Yeah, good question, Sophia. how important is the essay portion of the SAT? And do some schools require it? The answer is it's not very important. And the reason I say that is very few schools require the essay. So for years, I've been telling people just take the essay just to be on the safe side, just in case you want to apply to a college that's going to require it. But as the years have gone on, less and less schools have required it. So at this point, I really would not bother with the essay. Certainly not for students going into their senior year. I probably wouldn't even bother if I was going into my junior year. It's just very unlikely that schools are going to care how you scored on the essay. And by the way, the essay is its own separate score on both exams. So when you get your main SAT score and your main ACT score, that does not include your essay. That's a separate score. Yeah, so I mean, again, just lots of great questions. A great question here. If I got a 13 on the ACT, is it recommended to do it again? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I would take the ACT again unless I already scored like a 34, 35, or 36. Again, I'm very passionate that you can improve. So if you scored below average, below a 21, don't get demoralized. I know it's easy to get demoralized. Don't get demoralized. There are many easy points you can pick up with just a few hours of studying. And by the way, on the self-paced program I described earlier, we have a section called resource materials. And if you don't mind, jot that down. Many students find this to be the most important part of the entire program. So in the resource material section, we have SAT and ACT cram packets. And students love these, right? Because it's a packet that you can print or download to your phone, and you can study it, you can memorize it. It's all of the rules, formulas, all the items that we know you're going to be tested on. We've had students go up 150 points on the SAT just from memorizing those packets. So again, that's in the resource material section. And to that student who asked that question, I bet you can go from a 13 to a 21 just from memorizing the packets and from putting a few hours working through the checklist. Can you submit both an ACT and SAT score to a college? Yes, you can submit both, but it's not necessary. And I don't recommend it unless they were exactly the same. But I would try to improve on one or the other and just submit that one best score. Yeah, Luke, good question. Any advice for homeschoolers? Not really. I mean, I guess in these last few months, we're all homeschoolers, right? But I mean, what I would say to homeschoolers is take advantage of maybe the flexibility in your schedule. Look, we all like to work at our own pace. We all like to work at times that are good for us. So, no matter if you're a homeschool or, you're just home this summer, put it into your calendar, put it right in your phone. Every Wednesday from 2 to 4, I'm going to knock out a few tasks and I'm going to improve on my SAT. And if you do that over the next 10 weeks, you're going to see a massive difference in your score. Yeah, so, and Carmen, it's a kind of a great question. I want to address it. My thoughts on the idea that the testing industry and the College Board promotes class stratification. It takes money to do well. So we have 1,500 schools around the country that purchase the program for students. It doesn't cost the school very much. So students of those schools do not have to pay. And so my program is free to a lot of students. Also, of course, Khan Academy is free. There have been many students who have used the SAT or ACT to prove that they're high achievers, regardless of the high school they go to, or maybe even if their GPA isn't as high as it could be. So I've worked with many students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, and many of them have been very successful. And I think for me, the bigger concern is that many students are wildly unprepared for these exams, and there's no reason for that. That even when using the Khan Academy or using some of the other free resources out there, those students really can do well. That's a great question. And I apologize because the questions are coming in fast and furious. I'm having a hard time keeping up. You just see if Grace has chatted in. Okay, thanks, Grace. Yeah, great question, Zachariah. How often would you recommend practicing per day on the SAT and ACT? Is there a point where it stops helping? So I think it's a great question. I'm going to give you an answer, a direct answer. I think you should put in 2.5 hours per week. 2.5 hours per week is a realistic amount of time. Yeah, if you put in 3.5 hours a week, 4.5 hours, then you can get through all the tricks and strategies and concepts faster. But 2.5 hours a week, I think, is appropriate. Yes, there is a point where it's law of diminishing returns. For example, like I said, if a student went from a 27 to a 31, I don't know if I would continue taking the exam if I was that student, because it's law of diminishing returns. And the reality is with 31, you're in great shape to get accepted in a lot of places, and you're very likely to get a very generous financial aid package. So that's a good question there. Thanks for that one. Yeah, another kind of great, similar question to, is it common that students do not start doing SAT, CT prep before senior year? Yes, that's common. So no, you're not behind. If you start preparing now, you can easily be 100% prepared for example, the September SAT or the September ACT. You can even be prepared for the August SAT, right? So there's still over a month before that exam. So no, you're not behind. And it is common that students don't start preparing until summer before senior year or even senior year. Yes, on the method test for program, when you take a practice exam, no matter what you take on the program, it's always going to tell you if you got it right or wrong. It's going to tell you the correct answer. And then again, you're going to have the video, the audio, the written explanations. Yeah, good question. How many times can you take the SAT in junior year? You can take the SAT as many times as you like. I don't want students to take the SAT more than 3 times, nor the ACT more than 3 times. I feel if you're doing that, it's just like you kind of throwing a Hail Mary and just hoping for the best. These are long tests. They're expensive. Of course, some students get a fee waiver, but regardless, it's a lot of time to invest. So I would rather help you score well on the first 2 or 3 times and not have to take it again, not have to worry about it. Yeah, a good question, Marcus. What is the score range to receive sort of a large scholarship? And of course, the answer is the closer to the high end, the better. But certainly, I've had students where they scored around a 1200 and they got a very large academic scholarship, a lot of merit aid. Of course, 1300, 1400, you have an even better chance or a larger package. But yeah, so towards that higher end, but sometimes not as high as you think. Just going to take a few more, everyone. I know we've been on for a long time, but I see so many good questions, so I want to make sure I get to a few more. Yeah, Pat, this is a good question from earlier. How will a one-time test that maybe is a low score affect getting a scholarship, and will colleges take? So the good news is one low score does not hurt you. You're not going to be penalized for a low score. When colleges are basing scholarship money on SAT scores, they're basing it on your best scores. So you're not going to hurt your chances. And so that's I want to take some of the pressure off students, because students are worried, like, oh my goodness, my first time I take it, what if I bomb it the first time? It's not going to hurt you. You'll improve for the next time. So just want to be black and white clear that a low score is not going to hurt your chances of admissions or scholarship. For one or two more here. Yeah, good question, Eliana. Since we take the PSAT in October, does it make sense to take the SAT in October as well? And then there's a second part to that. So part one is, and this comes up every year. If you're going to prepare for the SAT and take the SAT in October of your junior year, I think that's a good plan for a lot of students, especially this year. I think you can be successful. I probably wouldn't bother taking the PSAT in that case. The only exception is if they give the PSAT during the school day and your entire grade is taking the PSAT, I would probably take advantage of that opportunity and take the PSAT just as another testing experience. Obviously, I'm not even sure what else you would do that day, sit in like a study hall or maybe just stay home. But to me, I'd rather take the PSAT again and just get another accurate read on where they stand. The part two to that question was, will I learn more in pre-calculus for the SAT? And the answer is you'll learn a little bit more, but not a ton more. And I wouldn't wait to complete my year of pre-calc before taking the SAT. There's a few questions that you might have an easier time on having gone through pre-calculus, but not enough where it's something that I would wait on. Good question. Yeah, and then just one question here. What about students who have an IEP? So if you get extra time on tests in school, then you absolutely should get extra time on the SAT and ACT, but sometimes it's a process. So my advice to you is call up your guidance office tomorrow, get the process started, make sure that you're going to have the extra time that you deserve as part of your IEP. And then as far as like an expected score for a student, an IEP, I mean, the sky's the limit. We've had many students with IEPs who have scored right at the high end, max scores even. So again, I would never put a ceiling on any student, and you guys shouldn't put ceilings on yourselves. You can score well. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. Everybody, again, thanks for your time. I hope everybody got a couple of nuggets of information out of this. Let me see if I can just quickly switch to that slide where you can see my contact info. Yeah, right there. So I hope I'm sharing my screen there. So there's, our contact info. If you want to just jot it down, you can give us a call. Any questions you have about anything I shared tonight, or just the option, or if you just want to pick my brain about your situation. So number is 877-871 PREP, PrEP, obviously. And then my email is just Tom and the name of the program. So tom@methodtestprep.com. You can just shoot me an email. I'll get back as quickly as possible. So thank you everybody for taking so much time, and please do reach out if you have questions. And again, I'm just gonna say it again, you can be successful on these exams. I am 100% passionate, confident, every one of you can do well. Even just putting in a few hours will make an enormous difference on your score. Remember, one more question is 10 more points. 5 more questions, 50 more points. So, so good luck with the rest of the summer. Good luck with the fall. And hopefully I'll be in touch with some of you. Have a great night.